planning commissioner and your co-chair for this task force. Co-chair, Mr. Planning Commissioner Tim Sargent will not be able to join us tonight. So when it comes time to pass the virtual gavel, Ms. Catherine Ward has extended her volunteerism to help out in that capacity, and thank you for that. I want to welcome everyone to our Mount Vernon SSPA Task Force for Tuesday, October 26, 2021, to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance. The Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from separate locations, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask that each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Ms. Catherine Ward.
Catherine Ward, I'm here at my home on Gladstone Place, and I can hear you just fine.
Lynn Pasco.
I'm Len Pasco. I'm here at my home in Montebello. I'm hear you fine.
Gretchen Waltz.
Present at my home on New Market Road in Alexandria.
Tracy Wood.
Tracy Wood, I can hear you fine. And yes, I'm in my home in Mount Vernon Terrace in Alexandria, Virginia.
Queenie Cox. Mary Payton. Holly Doherty.
Hi, Walter. I'm at the Chamber of Commerce office.
Hamid Munir. Hillary Clausen.
This is Hillary Clausen. I'm at my home on Mason Neck. I can hear everyone. Thank you.
David Levine. Evan Kaufman. Ellen Young.
This is Ellen Young. I'm at home in Bellevue.
Thank you all very much. And at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to tonight's task force member filling in for co-chairman, Ms. Catherine Ward, so that I may be heard to read and make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force. I so move.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ellen and Lynn. And all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels this emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meetings, and that such FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting's link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of SSPA website at www.fairfaxcounty.gov. SSPA/development/plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956 TTY 711 and entering the access code. It is so moved.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lynn. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes.
Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself and necessary for the continuity in Fairfax County government and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and discharge of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Okay, so the meeting is still ongoing. It worked. It shifted over to me. So, oh, I apologize, y'all. I just realized I was on mute. Aaron dropped off because of a power surge. We're trying to figure something out.
Okay.
I apologize.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much, Catherine. I appreciate you stepping in tonight
No
and
problem.
helping
Thank
out. So we will go on to our agenda, and I will ask staff if there have been any public comments or emails that have been sent in since we last gathered that we need to address at this time.
Hi, this is Graham Owen. No, we've not received any public comments or letters on this on the agenda.
Okay, great. And so on the agenda, I see where we would be switching from WebEx to Microsoft Teams for future meetings. So the next meeting, is that when we will make that switch, Graham?
Yeah, we wanted to raise this as an agenda item. We've as y'all know, we've had some issues, not with every single meeting, but at enough meetings in terms of getting people into meetings. Just technical issues that we think we've gone far enough in terms of being able to say affirmatively that Microsoft Teams, which is something that we use more frequently internally, can provide all of the functionality of WebEx, but it's a bit more intuitive and user-friendly, including for those that are external to the to fairfaxcounty.gov. So we would propose and wanted to float the idea of doing a transfer whenever the task force thinks it's a good time to do it, and if you'd like to do it. It's not mandatory. There's nothing wrong with continuing with WebEx if you're familiar with it and like to continue with it, but we think that there might be some opportunities to improve the whole experience for both the task force as well as for members of the public. With
involved for us?
we could do it whenever you're ready, if you want to do it.
Well, what do we have to do? Do we have to download some software? What do we have to do? I've never used Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, so it's a pretty similar thing where you just download Microsoft Teams. We can send you pretty basic instructions on how to do it, but it's a download. It functions like an app on your computer or on your phone in a similar manner. It's just we on our end have not seen nearly as many issues with trying to navigate the software, and it seems to be kind of a problem. It's not just with this task force. We see it across multiple groups that are using WebEx. So yeah, it's pretty basic, pretty straightforward. It uses the same functionality as WebEx. It's just frankly
Somebody's been out there. Somebody's been out there wandering around through the wilderness, and you guys were ready to start. I think it's a good idea. Let's give it a try.
Okay.
I make a motion that we move to Microsoft Teams.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, you got your answer. It's real easy to use, guys.
That's easy for you to say, Catherine.
I use it
Anyway.
every day at work.
Yeah.
That's
You'll
all
be
my
fine,
problem.
Walter.
So,
I think you won't be
Fran-
disappointed at all. It's very intuitive. We use it all day long.
Okay,
So
and
what
it's
is-
already
most people-
set up in the county?
I hope so. If it's not,
Yeah,
we'll
they-
check in with Nick and make sure it is. I would imagine it is at this point. Yeah.
The executive
Right.
office uses it. Rachel Flynn uses it for tons of meetings with people.
Okay, all right. Great.
Yeah,
Sounds
well,
good.
this is-
So, go ahead.
Sorry.
Nick.
Yeah, this is Nick. We have it all set up in the Mount Vernon conference room as well, so you won't lose your capabilities to host from there.
Okay, great.
Oh, and
Thank
why
you.
don't you do a chat thing to find out who doesn't have it, and then you can send them the link so they can download.
Sure, we can do that. And we, if you'd like, for those that aren't familiar with it and haven't used it in the past, we'd be happy if you want to set up a time to just kind of run over it before one of our meetings, so show you the basic commands and everything like that. Happy to do that. No problem.
Walter, this is Gretchen. If you come by my office, I'll show you how to use it.
Thank you, Gretchen.
I use it every day.
I may have to take you up on that. I mean, I've used it. I haven't used it that frequently, but thank you.
Mhm.
All right, so thanks, Graham, for getting us set up with that. We're ready to get started with the next item on our agenda, the Huntington Metro Station. We're ready for that presentation. I'll turn that over to staff.
Very good. And I will similarly turn it over to FCDOT. In particular, we have a number of staff on the call from FCDOT that are integral to this plan amendment in particular, which we're talking about today, which is Huntington Metro Station. Let me recognize Bob Pecora, Tim Cutts, and Tom Burke. All of them you've met in the past and are familiar with, but they're going to be leading the discussion tonight and giving an overview of the transportation analyses that they are performing now and that they'll be coming back to you with results later on. So with that, let me, Tim, Bob, I'm not sure which one of you wanted to have the ability to share your screen, just let me know. So we can
It's going to be Bob.
Okay. All right, Bob, it's yours whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Setting up the presentation. Can you hear me? Your audio is a little garbled.
Bob, do you want to try plugging in like a headset or something like that if you have it?
Yeah, I don't have one. So,
You might need to turn off your video, so, and maybe that'll do it.
okay.
So we've missed seeing you, but.
Video, can you be better?
No, it's not any better.
Hello.
Tom, can you do what he's trying to do and we can't hear him? Oh, good.
Tom or
Tom's
Tom or
lost.
Tim would one of
Bob,
y'all
if
be
you
able to
run, if
pinch
you
it?
pull the slides up or send them to me, I'll run through them.
I think Tim might be better to.
Yeah, I'll run through them.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. Oh, I couldn't find my mouse to unmute.
You guys have the slides out now. I'm getting ready to pull them up.
And Tim, I can
Yeah.
make you presenter if you'd like.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that. Thanks.
So Aaron, you're actually going to have to be able to give Tim the presenter of privileges, because you reclaimed your host privileges when you signed back on.
All right.
Teams is better, y'all. I promise.
Case in point. Huh?
Case in point, yeah.
Okay, Tim.
All right, I got it. Hey. All right, so yeah, we're going to give an overview of, you may have seen the agenda flash up on screen briefly, the transportation policies that are, come from the transit-oriented development plan, from the policy guidelines. Along with that, I'm going to go over a few different planning efforts that are also happening at the same time as a plan amendment that sort of relate to those TOD policies. And then if Bob can't get on, I'll cover his portion on the actual transportation analysis. We do have the preliminary analysis from consultant Kimley Horn, and they will be submitting that to VDOT in November. So one of the late November meetings will be presenting a little more detail on that. All right, so getting started, the first principle, and again, Graham kind of gave a good overview of this in June, but these are sort of the principles from the TOD guidelines that really speak to transportation. And so this first one is really about setting the boundaries of the transit station area and having the higher levels of density closer to the station. A couple considerations are listed below. So in blue, I'm going to have some things to consider for when we actually get to the part where we talk about plan text and writing in recommendations. So with this development, with this higher intensity closer to the transit station area, we also need to consider that it is a transit station area, and so therefore there are going to be buses that need to access and operate efficiently, as well as, of course, the BRT system coming online in a few years. And that in developing this sixth station area, we don't want to preclude the future potential yellow line extension to Hydro Valley. The third principle is on pedestrian and bicycle access. So this is really key to developing transit station areas and getting people to use transit, getting people out of their cars. It's building this more rigorous or more developed pedestrian connectivity, pedestrian system, trying to minimize conflict with vehicles. So that could be minimizing crossing distances, making sure that we have safe crossings across North Kings Highway and across Huntington Avenue. And then implementing some wayfinding signage, so making sure people know where they're going and how to access the metro station itself, how to get to the trails that are nearby, and having pedestrian scale lighting to make sure that people feel comfortable when they're walking around the transit station area. And this fourth bullet, build a 10-foot wide shared use path along Huntington Avenue. So in the plan right now, there's currently, in the countywide trails plan that is, there's a recommendation for a bike lane along Huntington Avenue. However, one of the ways we might be able to bolster that recommendation is, take out the bike lane, just extend the width of that path along Huntington Avenue so that can be shared by both pedestrians and cyclists, get cyclists off of the road. One recommendation to consider to help improve bicycle level of traffic stress for the transit station area. Installing secure bicycle parking is an important one, making sure that when people do bike to the metro that they have a place to park. Seventh principle is on street design. So the big takeaway with this one is that you're designing the streets not only for vehicles, but also for the other users, pedestrians and cyclists. So one way you can do that is to implement some of the things listed below, such as on-street parking, wide sidewalks, street trees, that sort of alert the driver that they're entering a shared space. They're entering an area where they need to slow down. And it does typically have that effect of slowing cars down. and making the area safer for pedestrians and cyclists. We also want to minimize the access points for vehicles to try to minimize the interference with other modes. And then parking is a tricky one. Of course, we've mentioned that there's a parking demand study that WMATA is working on right now. We'll be able to report a little bit more on that later as that gets finalized. But we want to make sure, this being, terminal station, we want to make sure that we maintain adequate parking, but also employ some of the strategies, the TDM strategies that we'll get to in a little bit, teleworking and those sorts of things. Single occupancy vehicle use, reducing that by carpooling and car sharing to try to, drive more transit ridership, but make sure that people are still have that parking that they need.
But I apologize and just break in now, but
Sure.
I'd like to wait for the questions. I know it's better later, but nobody, it's incredible how many empty spaces there are in that parking area now. It's virtually empty. And I'd be very interested in your long-term projections when we're back to normal, quotes, whatever that is. How many people you expect to park there? Because there's very few. I walk through it all the time.
Right, and that's the tricky thing. And again, we'll get more into that when we actually get the parking demand study and really dive into that analysis. But ridership has been declining. Parking has obviously declined quite a bit at this station. And COVID hasn't helped that at all. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes in the coming years, and then what BRT does for that as well. Will more people be parking at the station to ride BRT south? So that's definitely a big consideration as part of this plan amendment, is getting that balance correct. So principle 9, speaking of balance, this is pretty much all about balancing transportation and traffic, balancing the intensity of the transit-oriented development with the other modes, the capacity to have the multimodal infrastructure, the trails, bike network, those sorts of things. And one of the ways to try to help balance that, again, is transportation demand management, having a strategy that can help reduce single occupancy vehicle trips, get people walking, get people biking, and using transit, more importantly, using transit to get around rather than their vehicles. And so when we do the analysis that we'll talk about in a bit, the traffic analysis, we assume the 45% trip reduction is going to take place. So whatever trips would normally be calculated for this site, that's going to be reduced by 45% because we're taking into consideration this is a transit station area. People are going to be walking, biking, and using alternative modes. And so some of the other strategies that you can use, I mentioned a few of them already: ride sharing programs, bus transit planning, parking management programs. Obviously, telework has been a big one lately. So those will play into the traffic in this area. So a couple of plans that can help us achieve some of these TOD goals. One of them is the Huntington Active Transportation Plan, and this is a plan that just kicked off 2 weeks ago, actually, as part of an MWCOG Transportation Land Use Connections grant. And for that grant, we have secured Baron Pierce as a consultant. They're going to be doing the study, and basically what they're going to be looking at is active transportation within the larger transportation station area. So on the right, the map that's outlined in orange, shaded in yellow, that's the transit station area. So a little bigger than the scope that we're looking at now. But they're going to do an existing conditions assessment. And so part of that, actually, we're going to be going out with them tomorrow, walking the site for a couple hours and noting where there might be gaps in the network, the pedestrian network, the bicycle network, and where we might be able to see improvements to connectivity. Part of that study will also involve a future land use assessment. So obviously there's a lot of development in the pipeline and a lot of planning efforts going on in this area. And so that's important to consider when you're trying to make recommendations for improving bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And so those recommendations will be borne out in the study, and we'll try to set a list of priorities and search for some funding sources that might be able to help achieve those recommendations in the future.
Let me just say again, I get a little nervous when people are talking about bicycle riding and driving. This is a huge up and down hill problem.
Yep.
And so somehow at the center of it has got to be how to get those people and the bikes up and down the hill, which should not be a big thing since we do it all over the world. But I keep not hearing anybody talking about how you get up from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top, actually.
Yeah, and that's the critical question. It's probably not wise to go speeding down North Kings towards Alexandria. So yeah, that's going to be a critical part of this, is looking at some interparcel connectivity between the metro site, Huntington Club, seeing what connectivity can be made between North Kings and Huntington Avenue. And one way that we're going to be doing that is by looking at one of Fair and Peer's analysis tools, which is called Street Score. And like we look at vehicular measures of effectiveness, like level of service, volume to capacity. This is a way to sort of assess the facilities that are out there today for bicycles and pedestrians, and applying and observing some of the attributes of those facilities. For example, sidewalks, how wide are they? Is there a buffer between the sidewalk and the street? What's the quality of the sidewalk? Is it deteriorating? And then looking at some of the adjacent roadway characteristics. What's the average volume on that roadway throughout the day? The speed of the road, the posted speed limit, that is. And so taking all those characteristics into consideration will then give you sort of a score, which you can see on the bottom left corner here. So they do that for bicycle facilities and pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, pathways, and crossings. And you can have a score from 1, which would be friendly to pedestrians or cyclists, all the way up to not safe, which would be 4. So they're going to do that assessment, rate the facilities around the transit station area, and give us a better sense of the gaps we need to fill and where we can make improvements. And if you do want more information about that, they do have a link at the bottom here that you can go to. But we already sort of do this. We have a bicycle map that's on the right. This is a bicycle level of traffic stress map, and it gives you an idea of what bicycling around Huntington is like right now. So you can see the green lines are more comfortable places for people to bike, but then the gray lines, and this is actually gray here, North Kings, you wouldn't feel very comfortable biking along this.
I'll go ahead and give you a 4 now.
Yeah, that would definitely be a 4. So here's a little bit of a sense of how the timeline for this active transportation study lines up with what we're looking at for the plan amendment. So this larger graphic here on the left is for the active transportation study, and then this blue shaded box kind of highlights some of the milestones for the plan amendment. So as I said, we started the project a couple weeks ago. They're going to be performing the existing conditions analysis through the beginning of December, and we hope to present that to the task force sometime in late November, early December. And then December, January, they're going to be doing the future land use assessment, creating project maps, developing recommendations. And here's the key part here is that's sort of in the middle of when we're going to be having the task force, you all vote on the plan text and discuss the plan text. So we have asked the consultant team to sort of front load those recommendations that pertain to the Metro Rail site itself. Obviously they're looking at a much bigger area in the entire TSA. So having those recommendations that you all would be interested as part of the plan amendment ready so that we can discuss them is pretty critical. But I think the timeline will line up pretty well. And we should have a final report for this study about the time this goes to Planning Commission.
Could I just be a pest one more time? And that is that normally when you're doing these bicycle studies, you have a path where people go. This one's only going to work if there's a mechanical way to get from the bottom to the top. And that needs to be in the center of your planning somehow. Every store that's 2 stories has this. Countries around the world, people around the world where they are very hilly places. Always Hong Kong comes to mind, where they have huge amounts of escalators and the way to work to get up and down the hill. But we need something more than just, well, if the path went this way, you'd only half die when you got to the top. I mean, it's got to be something that's a little more convenient.
Yeah, Japan does the same thing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And yeah, we will have to come up with some creative solutions for the grade, for sure.
I mean, the comment in Japan is you can't go up without going down because it's constant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gretchen, I think that was you. Could you send us a link to the example that you were describing? I'd be interested to take a look at it.
I'll find one and send it to you.
All right. Thank you.
While you're saying that, Graham, the Hong Kong, they go all the way from well up the peak where people live, all the way down to the commercial level. There's a very nice connecting escalators. It's quite easy.
Did not know that.
Well, Americans are getting fat. They ought to walk up hills.
But not to ride a bike up that hill. It's a bit.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, good luck with that. But yeah, that'd be great if we could see those examples. That'd be really helpful. So more to come with this. And like I said, we'll bring this back to the task force when we've gotten further along with this process. But another plan I wanted to highlight, and you all have probably heard of this one, is the Active Fairfax plan. And this is the larger countywide effort to sort of synchronize the countywide trails plan with the bicycle master plan and update the guidance within those, including policy recommendations, program recommendations, and recommendations for how to prioritize and which projects to fund. And a really interesting component of this plan is the crowdsourced map. It's kind of on the right here. You can actually drop a pin. You can do this now. There's a link at the bottom. Drop a pin anywhere on the map you think there might be a need for a better connection or something that needs fixed. You can leave your own comment. People can vote on it. So this person said there isn't an easy way to get from Kings Highway to here, which is true. And 7 people have favorited that comment. So it's just, it's helpful for us. We can go on here and see, what do people want to see in this area, what improvements we should be making. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to check this out and definitely provide feedback where you think is warranted. So any other questions on that? Any of those efforts?
I have a question. Are you guys directly speaking to the communities that are on Huntington Avenue, as well as those up on the North Kings Highway, such as Huntington and the Metro, whatever that townhouse is, and the Huntington little row houses, and then Jefferson Manor, as an example? Are you taking your spiel to them?
Yeah, so we are having probably mid to late November, a larger stakeholder meeting where we're going to get some of the civic associations and community groups out and get their feedback on what they want to see from this plan. And then from there, it unfortunately is a small grant. So Fairfax County is going to be handling sort of the outreach on the side as a separate effort, but making sure that, of course, we're including everybody along Huntington Avenue, North Kings, anybody who's in the TSA to provide feedback on this plan definitely is important.
Okay, well, just FYI, you ought to present it through the Mount Vernon Council's Transportation and Public Safety Committees, because all of those entities are members, so they'll get another look at it. And you've got other people that would then be using that area to get to wherever they're going. So I would encourage you to go to the council as well.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And they'll be hearing from us soon. We've just put together a list of invitees for the stakeholder meeting. And so a poll is going to be going out to everybody shortly.
Thank
Set
you.
up that meeting.
Let me just add another little anecdote to build the path from across by Avonton, which they had to redo. In the first instance, it blocked off the path from Huntington to the park up on the top of the hill. We had them open that area up. They opened it up, and there is now a quite well-worn path across the yard, across the park area there, of people going up and down, walking their dogs and doing all kinds of things. So there is a lot of traffic from bottom to top and top to bottom. We just have to figure out how to make it convenient for all of these other people, not just the dog walkers. That's all.
Right.
Bicyclists don't use the path, but the dog walkers do, and old men who are out for walks like me.
Yeah, that's a very good point. If there are no more questions on that, Bob, I don't know if you're back on or if you want me to continue on.
I have headphones now. Can anyone hear me?
All right, we're in business.
You guys can, okay. All right, so Tim, if you please advance the slide one to the next one. So thanks everyone for being patient and allowing me to present tonight. Bob Pecora with FCDOT. I work with Tim on this project. So I'm going to be talking about the transportation analysis that Kimley Horn and Stout and Teague are working on, and FCDOT is reviewing it, or has been reviewing preliminary drafts of it, and will be presenting it in the coming months. So in the transportation analysis and planning, it's complicated, but we have to account for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, and vehicle trips. In this area, in the TSA area, there's a lot going on with the development proposed along Huntington Avenue, North Kings, and Richmond Highway corridors. All these trip generators will need to be accounted for in the modeling for this proposed plan amendment, and all of this will need to be managed. So at the Huntington Metro site, we anticipate that 45% of new vehicle trips will not be in single occupant vehicles, while the remaining 55% will be. These will be on obviously the existing area roadways. Future growth in this part of the county and the region will mean that drivers going to and coming from DC, Alexandria, Maryland will be on the area network, including the transit system. The current bus system, the commuter rail, and then in the future, the BRT system. We also have the number of major roads that we have to account for, which is I-495, I-95 itself, Richmond Highway, Telegraph Road, and just to name a few there. And as I mentioned, the BRT system will be coming online, hopefully at the end of the decade, this decade. And so when that comes online, we'll have the potentiality to have taking other vehicles, additional single occupant vehicles off the road because they'll be able to use the BRT system. But it also gives people a different choice of transit to get around in the area. So, and we also will have, as Tim was mentioning, we're going to be looking at the pedestrian pathways and bike routes, hopefully putting together some recommendations with the consultant group. And then we'll still have commuter rail, we'll have the local buses and BRT buses. And yes, there will still be vehicles on the road. Next slide, please. So in preparing the transportation analysis, we looked at the areas around Huntington Metro. You see that in the red here. So we looked at the other developing areas like North Gateway, Huntington crossing the Parker, and Huntington Club to the west, Avonton to the south, and the South Alex. So we gathered all the information from these study areas, provided that to Kimley Horn, Stout and Teague so they can prepare the transportation analysis for this project. And they're going to be looking at something to create the 2019 existing conditions. So 2019, we use that as the base because that is obviously prior to the COVID. So we are using that as the base to establish what the conditions were in 2019. We weren't able to go back and do traffic counts in 2019 because we didn't have the project then. So through the use of the studies from the other project areas and their traffic impact analysis, plus the county model, we've been able to work with Kimley-Horn to establish, or actually to prepare the model that they need to do the study going forward. So, okay, next slide. So in the analysis, we have a 24 intersection analysis with the roads going, with the volume lane, with the road connections as well. So basically the major roads, Huntington, Richmond Highway, Telegraph Road, and we even include, and North Kings Highway. So along all those, we have 24 intersections to study. We went down as far as PennDOT, down by Shields Avenue, and the X and intersection 21 where the BRT station will be. So we've included all of that as part of the analysis, and looking at, besides the 2019, they're going to do a future comp plan analysis. That's our current comp plan projected out to 2045. And then also with their proposed land uses for Huntington Metro, take that analysis and with their land uses projected out to 2045. And that's accounting for pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, and the BRT system. Go back one, please. So we're looking at calculating the delay level of service, looking at turning and through volumes for each of the intersections, lane queues, which is how long the lanes are for where vehicles are stacking for turn movements and through lanes. And then what Tim did was, when he explained the TOD guidelines, we'll be looking at to identify those and looking at how those policies can be applied to this analysis. As I mentioned, we're looking at ped bike transit and also vehicle connections. And then if there's any situations where there's mitigations that need to be proposed, whether it's turn signals or a change in the lane configurations or something that like that, that will be identified with the analysis. So, and that will come out with the report. So next slide. So something we can look at right now is the average annual daily trip volume. So I pulled out the 4 roads, Huntington, North Kings, Richmond Highway, and Telegraph Road, just to give you an idea what the estimated projections are for vehicles on a daily basis for these roads. And this is off of VDOT's website, and that link is at the bottom. And they do have these for every jurisdiction in the state of Virginia. And for actually they do them every year. So they have 2019 data. They also have 2020 data, but it comes with a big asterisk because it's in the pandemic, and it accounts for like I think it's about 30% less trips. And there's just estimate, it's like it's not the most reliable to use the 2020. And since we established 2019 as the baseline, this gives you an idea as what the volumes were in 2019, estimated volumes on these roads. Next. Something else in the comp plan, the county's comprehensive plan is we have transportation policies. There's about a dozen of them. I wanted to call out the objective 3, and there's a number of objectives that help with moving people and goods and multimodal capability. But this one here, because it's in relation to the level of service, which is what we're looking to study, and that's something that we worked with VDOT to write the scope of agreement with Kimley-Horn that we're going to be looking at level of service, and what the minimum is, LOSD. And I'll explain those in the coming slides, what LOS, level of service is, and what D is and what E is. But we also have a memorandum of understanding with VDOT in the Northern Virginia area that an LOSE is acceptable, and it only applies to the roads. It's not on national highway system roads, which Richmond Highway is one. So on the roads that are part of this memorandum, we can have up to a level of service C, which actually increases the amount of delay that is acceptable for VDOT. And this would apply to comp plan amendments like what we're doing here, rezonings, use permits, and other transportation studies.
Bob, could I interrupt for a moment
Sure.
and ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're constantly talking about LOS. My understanding is that FCDOT is also looking at getting away from using LOS as the norm for considering movements of traffic. Could you address that, please?
Yes,
And
yes.
how it fits into this?
Yeah, so we are looking at that. We're working with VDOT to come up with alternative methods of evaluation or alternate methods of effectiveness. And the process has just started recently. And in order to get everything with the state of Virginia to agree to it, that's still a few years away. So the scope of work with this project, since we did work with VDOT to get it established in June to get this project going, they are still using the LOS metric. And so we still are using that as an LOS. When the state and VDOT VDOT and FCDOT come to an agreement on which methods to use, we can establish that for other studies, but unfortunately not with this study.
Our understanding is that the 2045 study doesn't even talk about the whole business of bus routes and other things. That it is not affected at all. It had no interest in it. So, you know, we've got a big issue here that seems to me that you have one side, you're working off of a study which doesn't talk about what we're planning to do with the whole process with the new BRT.
Yeah,
this makes no sense. I mean, it just strikes me as totally crazy that you make a study that says it's going to be this way. At least it was that way in 2010. And so that's obviously going to be what it's going to be. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Why do you think that we're going to be ignoring transit? This is a transit station, so we're going to be doing everything we can to maximize transit ridership.
But when you start, yeah, I agree with you, and I'm not arguing with you, but as I understand, the 2045 study doesn't take the transit things into consideration. Am I wrong?
It does.
It does consider it, and it's actually part of the analysis that transit is in there as part of the analysis. We have to project out to a certain point for 2045 per the county model. So we're looking at employment and population projections to the future to 2045.
The 45% trip reduction that we're taking, a lot of that is metro and bus trips. We're actually saying we believe in this site. It's a true TOD, transit-oriented development site. We're actually going to go to the same level of TOD trip reduction that we do in Reston, and maybe not quite as high as Tyson's, but pretty close to Tyson's. We have faith that transit, and including the connector and Metrobus, are going to be big users in this area, or get big amounts of users. But what Bob is describing is the vehicular. Tim described the active transportation component, so we're going to be looking at bike and ped. Bob described the vehicular. We're looking at vehicular because we need to do that. That's what our comp plan says. That's what VDOT says. The statutes say. And then what I was going to say was, I lost my train of thought. But we are absolutely not ignoring transit. That 45% trip reduction is a big statement of belief that transit is going to be a huge part of the transportation patterns and use in this area.
Thanks, Tom. You make me feel a lot better.
Yeah, the slide here that Tim presented about is we're talking about the TDM, the 45% reduction. That's something that we are already incorporating with the study that we told Kimley-Horn to work into their analysis.
And 45% is as high as we get outside of Tyson's. I think Tyson's has their own trip reductions that might get a little higher. But outside of Tyson's, we don't go higher than 45%. So we're treating Huntington in the same light we do Reston stations and others in the county.
Tim, can you go back to the slide after the LOS? Oh, this one, after this one. Okay, so I wanted to throw in a couple of slides here that talks about what level of service is and how it's measured for signalized and unsignalized intersections. And basically the level of service is the average delay of all the vehicles going through an intersection in a signalized intersection. We're looking at LOSD per the county comp plan, but with the memorandum of understanding, we can go up to level service E. So VDOT will accept up to an 80-second delay, and whereas normal other streets, it's level service D at 55 seconds. Next slide talks about unsignalized intersections, and this one is just based on whichever movement has the highest delay. So it could be any movement, and usually it's typically it's the stop controlled intersections that have the highest delay, and that would set the tone for the entire intersection. Let's say one of the turning movements or one of the through movements has a high delay, then that applies to the entire intersection. And it has a different criteria for what delay is acceptable at 35 seconds at LOSD or 50 seconds at LOSE. Next slide. We also have trip generation. This is one of the tools that we use for measuring the amount of trips generated per the land uses. Here, this table here is a comparison between the current comprehensive plan, all the land uses that are proposed there, and the proposed comprehensive plan that the applicants are looking to do for their land use mix and their transit-oriented development with the residential, employment, and retail uses. So as a comparison, the current comp plan projects out 4,132 trips. This is per the Institute of Transportation Engineers. There's a trip generation manual. It's a nationwide standard that all transportation planners and engineers use. And so it gives us a basic metric of understanding what the trips are generated for this use, for the site. In the proposed comp plan, the land use is the one in green. This is their land uses that they're proposing to do with their 1.5 FAR and generating the number of trips per day and then AM and PM peak trips. But they're also taking that 45% trip reduction credit because it's a transit station. And so with taking the trip reduction credit here, meaning that there are going to be less vehicles on the road, taking the reduction because you have transit and other transit opportunities with BRT, regular buses, and the commuter rail, you can still apply that to the land uses as well to reduce the trip generation on that site. So we're looking at about, at this point, 4,300, 4,400, 4,350 more trips over the current comp plan. And that's going to be used as the basis for the traffic analysis. Okay, next slide. And this one here is just, I broke it down to the base unit for the ITE trip generation manual. The land use codes, the land use types it is, so it's residential, low rise, mid rise, and high rise. And the general office and the shopping retail center. So based on either for residential, it's one dwelling unit, it's 7.32 trips per day. High rise residential, actually, as you get higher in height, the trips actually go down. So interesting to know. The shopping center retail, we used this one as a base, even though there aren't any retail uses named for this project as yet. We're using this as a general guide that retail centers per 1,000 square feet will generate 37.75 trips. When actual uses are known, probably at the zoning stage, then trip generation will change based on those land uses, and there's different values for those. Okay, next slide. So this one is the schedule. This is where we are today, obviously presenting tonight. We did get a preliminary analysis from Kimley Horn Stoughton Teague to review last month, and we have provided them with comments along the way. They're looking to do a submittal to VDOT, a formal submittal to VDOT and FCDOT, which will in the area in the green here. Once it's submitted, it starts a 90-day review process with VDOT. And typically, VDOT has about takes about 30 to 45 days to do their initial review and provide comments back. So we will present some more information about the analysis itself to the task force on November 30th, and then also back again on December 14th. We'll split that up so it's not overwhelmingly boring. So it's never boring. Analysis is always fun. But we'll be looking for VDOT's comments sometime in mid-December. We'll have December to January to work with Kimley-Horn and Stoughton Teague to address the comments. If VDOT does request a resubmittal of the traffic analysis, they will need to submit that with a comment resolution. And then if all goes well and VDOT accepts the mitigations and the analysis methodologies and such, we might be able to get an acceptance letter in February. But we'll also be able to speak with you all at the task force at the transportation meeting, or at the task force meeting on February 23rd. So I'm already planning on doing something like that. And so in line with when the task force is starting to work on plan text and recommendations, you'll have information about the traffic analysis ahead of time. So you'll be able to use that knowledge for the review. We'll have also recommendations in the plan text that we will prepare, and you'll have that going forward with as this plan amendment goes forward. So my next slide is just the question slide. Any questions?
I was going to let other people talk first, but I'll raise one more question.
Okay.
Obviously, this development is going to make Huntington Avenue much more of a road that's being crossed. It is now just behind Richmond Highway, Route 1, of not having crossing places. I mean, people cross all over the place. It's got a couple of crosswalks down it with no signage. It's pretty crude at this point. But are you planning in your traffic studies to make this more pedestrian friendly? I mean, we have a big talk about pedestrians and bicycles, and then once we start talking about roads, everybody says, "Oh, no more crosswalks."
Right.
So I mean, I'm out of sync on this whole thing. We're going to start. I mean, Huntington Avenue is a very dangerous place to cross, and a lot of people cross it willy-nilly all over the place. And so somehow in the planning, this very early stage, we have to start thinking how we're going to help this problem rather than make it worse. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Tim.
I was just gonna say, I can take this one. Yeah, so that's a big part of what we're going to be looking at tomorrow when we do the site visit for the active transportation study, is looking at those crossings you noted on, like some of the mid-block crossings on Huntington Avenue, and seeing if there are places where we can make those safer or improve the crossing of Huntington Avenue. And so that's one component of it. And Bob talked about the transportation study. This is all going to be a balancing act because we have these competing modes, and just because one intersection has a level of service E, for example, we have to decide, are we okay with that because we might be able to implement some sort of pedestrian improvement here. And so those are the questions that we're going to take very seriously. And I think having this active transportation study accompany the traffic study is a good way that we're going to be able to achieve some of those goals and identify those trade-offs. So that is something that we're going to be taking a very close look at. We know that pedestrian and bicycle connectivity is critical for the transit operations and for driving transit here, for driving people to use BRT and Metro. So again, something, I just want to reiterate the point, that's something that we're very much focused on.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one other thing though, and this is the question of what we're going through in Fairfax County. I mean, our problem is, of course, is we're going to be an urban area. We're working on being an urban area very rapidly here. And when we start talking level of service, you act like we're sort of out in the country somewhere. And so this is an issue I have a real problem with. I just don't see how, an urban street, you walk across an urban street because traffic is going slowly. You want it to go slowly. You don't want it to have a high level of service. You want it to be slower. Anyway, I just throw that out. I mean, this whole problem of Richmond Highway in this area is that in 20 years, in 25 years, 30 years, if Amazon keeps at it and everybody else keeps at it, it's going to be an urban place, which was promised to us as a main street. And so we've got to start thinking in those terms rather than, you know, some rules that are set up for, Fauquier County or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the as Tim was mentioning, if we're looking at pedestrians and pedestrian access, it's like with the vehicle analysis, we've got to look to see what impacts the pedestrian and bicycles, and also what pedestrian and bicyclists, how they impact the traffic analysis. So we're mixing the two, but we're going to be comparing both of them. So if there's recommendations for additional pedestrian crossings on Huntington, and if we need to do a signal or a pedestrian signal or something like that, we have to include that with the analysis. And that's something that Kimley-Horn may need to reevaluate the Huntington Avenue if there's an additional signal. So what that would do with the model. So
yeah, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine. Go ahead.
Well, Ellen, you go first.
Or whoever. Yeah.
There is one crossing that absolutely drives me crazy at the Huntington Metro. It's where the driveway to the parking garages is. And the crosswalk is on the west end. So in other words, people cross Huntington and then they have to cross over the driving lanes that cars use to go in and out in order to get to the Metro. Well, and there's no crosswalk there. They just have to cross over and cars are coming and going. And that is absolutely insane. It should be on the other side where they get to the sidewalk and they can go on to the Metro. If you could look at that just makes me crazy every time I see it. It makes me nervous.
Right. To have crosswalks on both sides, or actually we like to have them on all four legs of the intersection.
That would be great. That would be great.
I have a question. You know, you keep speaking about Huntington Avenue and crosswalks and all this good stuff. As you are doing the analysis with Kimley-Horn, are you really looking at from Richmond Highway all the way to Telegraph? And are you taking into consideration the fact that, and I've gone brain dead on the name of the apartments they just got approved for another 900 units. And you have North Gateway, which is being reviewed. It has an increased 2.0 density, and there are in fact developers sniffing around to try to consolidate that. Are you taking those projected future developments into consideration?
Yeah, actually, those were used as part of the basis for the modeling that Kimley-Horn is using for the site. So we gave them the North Gateway model to use as the basis. And the other apartments, the other regional, I think there was about 16 or so projects we included or gave them information on. This graphic here just highlights a few of them. So there's like a number of them in the area. So.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you, Riverside. I just went brain dead.
Riverside, yes, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the other one. Yeah, so
thank you.
That's in there. Yeah. And any other questions?
Bob and Tim, thank you both for the presentation. Very good, very well done. Under ride sharing and through your traffic analysis, have you considered, or are you all considering autonomous driving vehicles and what impact that may play coming down the road? Would we have more frequent trips because self-driving cars can pick up more, quicker than an Uber driver, and parking where those cars are going to go when they drop you off at the Metro? And
Right. Well, good question, Walter. It's like I believe that also came up when we were doing the Embark study. That are we accounting for autonomous vehicles? And that technology is still not quite there yet for us to incorporate in it. And there's some progress being made for those, but I think in future studies we'll be able to take a credit for autonomous vehicles, but we don't have that technology there yet, or even how do we take a credit for that just yet. So
It's too soon.
not quite there yet. So getting there, but not quite. Sorry.
I haven't
Okay.
been at a station in a while, and I was just curious, do they have electric charging stations for the electric vehicles?
I would ask.
The answer to that's
DLT.
no. There
They
are
don't
none.
have that yet.
No, I don't know that. So I'd ask
Pretty
for,
sure there are.
Is Wamata on the call?
or Stephen Sutherland if they're online.
Neil Teague, they don't currently, and others at Wilmota could know, they've done some pilot studies where they're looking at those possibilities, system-wide, obviously, because it wouldn't just apply to Huntington. But I don't know of any, the status of those studies. It's something though that I know they're looking at.
Okay, thank you. I just noticed they were really booming down Richmond Highway, that we have so many showing up everywhere. Costco's, the Walmart, the Walgreen. I mean, they're just all up. I'm just so surprised there's so many. And so I just wondered how the subways were handling that. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
I was gonna say that might be something that could come up during the rezoning for Wilmota sites. So I know in other rezoning cases, charging stations has been part of the mitigation package. So I think that might be something that could be addressed a little bit later.
I think Tom's probably right. Typically, it is a requirement to have a certain amount of charging stations to have the infrastructure for more easily install other charging stations as demand comes. So I think we expect that as part of the rezoning.
Any others? Okay, I'm hearing none. Graham or Aaron, if you're ready to take back the meeting.
Thank you, guys. It was excellent.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that. And the rest of the task force, appreciate that.
Gave us a lot more information than we've had before. Thank you.
So Graham, are we ready for public comments?
That's exactly, that's what I was going to say. I think the next thing on the agenda is public comments. So I know we've got a couple of folks that are on the call from the public, and as is the custom, if you'd like to speak during this phase, what you can do is just raise your hand. So go into your participants panel in the bottom right-hand corner, click participants, and then from there you'll see a little hand. So if you'd like to say something, just raise your hand by clicking on that button. That'll let us know that you'd like to speak, and we can unmute you. So we can open it up now if anybody would like to speak.
Ross, I don't know if you raised your hand, but go ahead. Nope. Okay.
All right, so last call. Anybody else that wants to say anything from the public? So I'm not seeing any Clark, so we can proceed.
Okay. Are there any closing comments from the task force?
I'm gonna ask if we're having a jam session afterwards. I see Graham has a guitar in the background there.
That's my other YouTube channel. So.
Oh.
Just thanks again. That was very useful. I
It was. Thank you very much.
So what is our next meeting and what's the agenda for it, please?
November 9th, right? No, November 2nd. Wow. No, I thought we changed.
It's the 9th.
It's the 9th.
It's the 9th.
Well,
Right.
Can I make a comment on that, please? Several of us are going to have to testify on the 9th because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with the Board of Supervisors. Has anybody considered deconflicting that?
Are you driving out to the government center?
Oh, no way, kiddo. I am anti-drive. But we've got the redistricting. We have a couple of other nominations that are running around and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I would think citizens would want to be listening to what's going on with the redistricting of the county, blah, blah, blah. So I just throw it out there if anybody else cares besides me.
I care. I want to know what
I
they
noticed that
with.
doesn't come up until redistricting is at 3 p.m. And I truly doubt it'll be done by 6:30 because for authorized publication of all 64 redistricting plans.
They'll get to us around midnight. Seriously.
Yeah.
So Aaron and Graham, do you all want to look at an alternative date?
Unless Walter can move us up in the schedule.
Yeah, we can, if you'd like, we can send around a poll. I think that might be the best way to do it. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We had shifted it off of election day since it's a holiday for the county at least. So I know a lot of people are busy on election day. So that's why we had moved it from the 2nd to the 9th. But if we want, if the group has some other commitments, we can shop around another date and see what we can bring back. I think the next item, Aaron, if I remember correctly, we'd be focusing on the Mount Vernon Highway SNA study and doing kind of a kickoff with that. So I think we can.
That's correct.
If the group wants, we can shop around a couple of dates, but we want to make sure that the public that is going to be involved with that effort, there's a different group of people that are interested. Have enough notice. So we can look for.
We don't have to shift it a whole week. We can just move another day on that week if you guys are really pressured to get things done. But
let's see here. Well, we could look at least right now, other days of the week would potentially work for me. It's more for Megan and Aaron on Mount Vernon Highway SNA study. So to you guys.
And we haven't finalized exactly what that will be yet. But it may be a presentation from the consultant about public involvement that we'll be using for the public meetings.
Okay. Well,
so we could potentially look at the 11th, that Thursday.
We can potentially look at that. Yeah. Aaron, do you remember if Victor was going to be coming in person for this, or how is that going to work? I just want to make sure.
We don't know yet. Yeah.
All right. We'll get on that and provide a couple of alternative dates for that week if it's possible to shift it around. Make sure that we've got enough people. We want to make sure everyone's there. So
Megan's right. November 11th is Veterans Day, so I don't know if that's a holiday for you all, but the 8th or the 10th. So.
And holidays. So the 10th, Tim and I. You know what? Planning Commission. We may not have Planning Commission that week since it's a holiday on the 11th.
We'll send out a poll and see how many people, pick your number 1 and your number 2 days. See if we can get a quorum.
Right. And I know we're missing a couple of folks from the task force tonight, so we can do a poll.
Usually,
send something around.
It's those who attend who get a vote.
That's me.
All right.
Megan just noted that it sounds like Victor is not going to be coming in person at this point, so I don't think that's as much of a constraint as I was worrying. So, okay. All right, we'll send around a poll and go with the plurality.
And which product are you going to use for your poll? Teams or the other?
I think what we'd be looking to do is shift it over to Teams for the next meeting.
Okay, so you're going to do your poll in Teams as well?
Do you know how to do that, Aaron? Do you know how to do a poll in Teams?
No,
we can, but We can check on it that way. If we can't do it that way, there's a couple of polling features in there that we can do as well.
I don't think it's too difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the group tonight? Do I hear a motion for us to adjourn?
I so
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Second.
All in
moved
favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Is that Ellen opposing?
No.
You don't want to end it?
No. You know me better than that, Walter.
Everybody have a great rest of the week.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Yeah,
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate everyone's help. Have a good night.
Right.
Good night.
Hey, everyone.